How are we doing, lovely people? Are we out there sitting comfortably? Is anybody out there? I'm having a I'm having a chat with Sally. Hey, Lord Swordplay. Hello, hello. I did put the right time up, didn't I? Mm. Hey, Chestnut Mare. Um. All right, gang. I'm just gonna put on. Be right back because I'm gonna get myself a wee drink and and then I will be back. People sliding in there. Hey, Weedy as well. Hi, Bianco. Raccoli Manaveri. Ziggy Wee Stardust is here as well. Kermit985. Hello, hello. Hi, Dadzig is streaming today. I'm good. I've had a very long day so far. Good daddy. Some muses dissent. Hey, Quest Disaster. First time chat. Good evening indeed. Scottish Eye. Hello, Fish and Gecko and Dadzig. Indeed. Thank you, Barbarian. Chrome and Joma. Hello. Hey, Giselle. Marigold Nettle. Charlene Murray 3. Hey, from the Scottish lassie. Really, really happy to be here. A singular greeting to you indeed as well, Prickly Triangle. Frozen? Who's frozen? Don't tell me it's frozen. Oh, you made lasagna. Nice. I wondered what you were using the bechamel for. Servus, Nilanya. Wie geht's dir denn? Frozen. Yeah. All right. So I'm just gonna put you. I don't have a be right back right now. This is my be right back there. Um, so I'm gonna go grab myself a drink, and do you think it'll freeze, Charlie? Or kohlrabi Gemüse? Oh my god. Mmm. Good stuff. Eyes are closed, pointed at the fish. What you mean the camera? I'm not sure there's much to see. The lights are off. Sorry, gang. The slightly overcrowded fish tank. Um, Overcrowded with what, you might ask? Plants. Um, no, I'm just gonna have to put you on a black screen for a minute. All right. Oh, maybe you can just look at the fish. All right, you can have a look at the fish. There we go. New fish tank. The mug is empty, which is why I'm gonna go fill it up. All right. See you in a moment. God damn it! I thought I pressed unmute the whole time I was talking to you so nicely. I was saying that yes, the fish are unnamed, and the aquarium's looking pretty happy and clean. But anyway, thanks for pointing that out. Eventually, someone. And I was also saying about the Papa San chairs Sim uses done as yeah, my folks had one when I was growing up, and they got rid of it. I got this one free on Facebook. Oh, awesome! Silent stream. What voice would the chair have? Hello, I am chair. I'm not still muted. Don't give me that. Um. Okay. Yeah, I know. I did click it. I clicked it, and I thought I clicked it, and I didn't. Keypad on this laptop's a little bit. It chooses when it wants to work. I'm unironically trying to lip. Yeah. Well, what did you make of it, Prickly Triangle? What did you think I said? My demented shit that was going out of my head. How are the fish? The fish are fine. The snails are fine. I still don't know why one of them died. Although the guy in the shop did say, make sure they don't ever end up on their back because then they can't turn over. The other one with the little horns, which I can't remember what it was called now. You all filled me in on that last week. Could you enjoy some improv theatre kind of thing in June when I'm in Prague? Maybe on the 19th. I don't know what day that is. Is that what day of the week is that? But yes, we will be doing improv pretty much every Friday. I'm super low. I can also turn it up. We're on Saturday's levels. Is that better? Yeah, but I don't. Sorry, Jade. I don't have any money in for either of these teams. I don't support England. I know. And I will hear the Welsh aren't doing so well. So, but I mean, watching France is always a good game, I guess. Friday the 19th. I guess there'll be an improv show, but I believe that's the weekend of Kutnahora, isn't it? Yes. A tiny bit more. All right, then I'll just move it up. Oh, move it up. Gonna go move it up. Oh, move it up. So it's the weekend after. I need to go there. Hang on a second now. Oh, what? I don't know what you're saying. I'm going to look at my June calendar because I'm confused now. March, April, May. Ratai's 13th, 14th. No, Kutnahora is on the 20th. Kutnahora is 20th, 21st. Ratai is the weekend before. And in fact, I have. I don't know what I'm doing on Friday the 19th. Yeah, 19th is Kutnahora. Ratai is 13, 14. Yes. Cool. All right, gang. I have had a pretty long day, so I'm going to do a little bit of reading for you. I believe we're supposed to finish Marie Roger, isn't it? Cool, Zach. Sup, all? So this is cool. Last Friday, did the improv, and then Giselle came after and brought me this little beauty. Look at that. Look, there's Michael Hall. He's got his chef's hat on. And he's got a book. Michael Hall. Thank you, Giselle. Sally cooked, yeah. Good morning indeed. That's okay. Character is neither a miserable or murderous git. It's the French detective thing. Yeah. Mm. Yay! Finally glad can stand up. Tiny little hooves, I know. We don't have names for the fish yet. We were supposed to do some kind of competition or something. Big up, Branik. Mmm. Oh, santé. Pas de pied. All right. We still have a ways to go with the mystery of Marie Roger. Oh no. Oh no, we don't. Let's start with a short poem, shall we? And I've got two bookmarks here because I got my old one, and I can put it straight in the poems. So that's pretty handy. Um, that's it. You live and learn. Live and learn. Annabel Lee. Did we read Annabel Lee? Did we read Annabel Lee already? Where's Alison? Exactly. I know. I know. Hopefully feeling better. I had a fever the other day. We're going to read Annabel Lee because I don't think we have. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child and she was a child, in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee. With a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love it was stronger by far than love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we, and neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so, all the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in the sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. Hello, lass who games. Is that your favourite poem? Well, there we go. So we are Valeria. Hello, just in time. No bosoms so far. I think we're still on 25, aren't we? Or 24? We didn't go up last time. Thank you, Ziggy Wiggy Stardust. Wowsies. Oh, shite. I almost knocked my beer over with my warm water. I'm not sure, but I think the guy likes Annabelle Lee. I'd say so. I'd say so. All right. we're gonna get back into the mystery of Marie Roget, and where do we get to? Oh, that's right. All the newspaper clippings, which were um, basically talking about the past and how she'd gone missing before, um, and that there were some guys on the riverbank and whatever else. And Dupin is basically he's already solved it. He's just dicking with us and not spilling the tea. Come on, spill the tea, Dupin. Bosomless. I know, Valeria. We're still on 25, I think. 24, 25. Although we did get some breasts last time, didn't we? One or two? Is the breast counter up? Um, I don't know. Okay, so upon reading these various extracts, they not only seemed to me irrelevant, but I could perceive no mode in which any of them could be brought to bear upon the matter in hand. I waited for some explanation from Dupin. "It is not my present design," he said, "to dwell upon the first and the second of these extracts. I have copied them chiefly to show you the extreme remissness of the police, who, as far as I can understand from the prefect, have not troubled themselves in any respect with an examination of the naval officer alluded to. Yet it is mere folly to say that between the first and the second disappearance of Marie there is no supposable connection. Let us admit the first elopement to have resulted in a quarrel between the lovers, and the return home of the betrayed. We are now prepared to view a second elopement, if we know that an elopement has again taken place, as indicating a renewal of the betrayer's advances, rather than as the result of new proposals by a second individual. We are prepared to regard it as a making up of the old amour, rather than as a commencement of a new one. The chances are 10 to 1 that he who would have once eloped with Marie would again propose an elopement, rather than that she to whom proposals of elopement had been made by one individual should have then had them made by her to another. And here let me call your attention to the fact that the time elapsing between the first ascertained and the second supposed elopement is a few months more than the general period of the cruises of our men of war. Had the lover been interrupted in his first villainy by the necessity of departure to sea, and had he seized the first moment of his return to renew the base designs, but not yet altogether accomplished, or not yet altogether accomplished by him, of all these things we know nothing. You will say, however, that in the second instance there was no elopement as imagined. Certainly not. But are we prepared to say that there was not the frustrated design? Beyond Saint Eustace and perhaps Beauvais, we find no recognized, no open, no honorable suitors of Marie. And none other is there anything said. But who then is the secret lover, of whom the relatives, at least one of them, know nothing, but whom Marie meets upon the morning of Sunday, and who is so deeply in her confidence that she hesitates not to remain with him until the shades of the evening descend among the solitary groves of the Barrière de Roule? Who is that secret lover, I ask, of whom at least most of the relatives know nothing? And what means the singular prophecy of Madame Roget on the morning of Marie's departure? I fear that I shall never see Marie again. But if we cannot imagine Madame Roget privy to the design of the elopement, may we not at least suppose that this design entertained by the girl? Upon quitting home, she gave it to be understood that she was about to visit her aunt in the Rue de Drôme, and Saint Eustache was requested to call for her at dark. Now, at first glance, this fact strongly militates against my suggestion, but let us reflect. That she did meet some companion, and proceed with him across the river, reaching the Barrière de Roule at so late an hour as 3 o'clock in the afternoon is known. But, in consenting so to accompany this individual, for whatever purpose, to her mother known or unknown, she must have thought of her expressed intention when leaving home, and of the surprise and suspicion aroused in the bosom of her affianced suitor, Saint Eustace, when calling for her, at the hour appointed, in the Rue de Drôme, he would find that she had not been there, and when, moreover, Upon returning to the pension with alarming intelligence, he should become aware of her continued absence from home. She must have thought of these things, I say. She must have foreseen the chagrin of Saint Eustace, the suspicion of all. She could not have thought of returning to brave this suspicion, but the suspicion becomes a point of trivial importance to her, if we suppose her not intending to return. We may imagine her thinking thus: I am to meet a certain person for the purpose of elopement, or for certain other purposes known only to myself. It is necessary that there be no chance of interruption. There must be sufficient time given us to elude pursuit. I will give it to be understood that I shall visit and spend the day with my aunt at the Rue de Trône. I will tell Saint Eustache not to call for me until dark. In this way, my absence from home for the longest possible period without causing suspicion or anxiety will be accounted for, and I shall gain more time than in any other manner. If I bid Saint Eustache call for me at dark, he will be sure not to call before, and if I wholly neglect to bid him call, my time for escape will be diminished, since it will be expected that I return the earlier, and my absence will be the sooner exciting anxiety. Now, if it were my design to return at all, if I had in contemplation merely a stroll with the individual in question, it would not be my policy to bid Saint Eustache a call. For calling, he would be sure to ascertain that I have played him false, a fact of which I might keep him forever in ignorance by leaving home without notifying him of my intention, by returning before dark, and by then stating that I had been to visit my aunt in the Rue de Drôme. But, as it is my design never to return, or not for some weeks, or not until certain concealments are effected, the gaining of time is the only point about which I need give myself any concern. You have observed, in your notes, that the most general opinion in relation to this sad affair is, and was from the first, that the girl had been a victim of a gang of blackguards. Now, the popular opinion, under certain conditions, is not to be disregarded when arising of itself. When manifesting itself in a strictly spontaneous manner, we should look upon it as analogous with the intuition, which is the idiosyncrasy of the individual man of genius. In 99 cases from the 100, I would abide by its decision, but it is important that we find no palpable traces of suggestion. The opinion must be rigorously the public's own, and the distinction is often exceedingly difficult to perceive and to maintain. In the present instance, it appears to me that this public opinion in respect to a gang has been superinduced by the collateral event which is detailed in a third of my extracts. All Paris is excited by the discovered corpse of Marie, a young girl, beautiful and notorious. This corpse is found bearing marks of violence and floating in the river, but it is now made known that, at the very period, or about the very period in which it is supposed that the girl was assassinated, an outrage similar in nature to that endured by the deceased, although less in extent, was perpetrated by a gang of young ruffians upon the person of a second young female. Is it wonderful that the one known atrocity should influence the popular judgment in regard to the other unknown? This judgment awaited direction, and the known outrage seemed so opportunely to afford it. Marie, too, was found in the river, and upon this very river was this known outrage committed. The connection of the two events had about it so much of the palpable that the true wonder would have been a failure of the populace to appreciate and to seize it. But, in fact, the one atrocity, known to be so committed, is, if anything, evidence that the other, committed at a nearly coincidence, was not so committed. Not so committed. It would have been a miracle indeed if, while a gang of ruffians were perpetrating at a given locality a most unheard of wrong, there should have been another similar gang in a similar locality in the same city under the same circumstances with the same means and appliances engaged in a wrong of precisely the same aspect at precisely the same period of time. Yet in what, if not in this marvelous train of coincidence, does the accidentally suggested opinion of the populace call upon us to believe? Before proceeding further, let us consider the supposed scene of the assassination in the thicket at the Barrière de Roule. This thicket, although dense, was in the close vicinity of the public road. Within were three or four large stones, forming a kind of seat with a back and a footstool. On the upper stone was discovered a white petticoat. On the second, a silk scarf, a parasol, gloves, and a pocket handkerchief were also here found. The handkerchief bore the name Marie Roger. Fragments of the dress were seen on the branches around. The earth was trampled, the bushes were broken, and there was every evidence of a violent struggle. Notwithstanding the acclamation with which the discovery of this ticket was received by the press, and the unanimity with which it was supposed to indicate the precise scene of the outrage, it must be admitted that there was some very good reason for doubt that it was the scene. I may or I may not believe, but there was excellent reason for doubt. Had the true scene been, as La Commerciale suggested, in the neighborhood of the Rue Pavée Saint-André, the perpetrators of the crime, supposing them still resident in Paris, would have naturally have been stricken with terror at the public attention thus acutely directed into the proper channel, and in certain classes of minds there would have arisen at once a sense of the necessity of some exertion to redivert this attention, and thus, the thicket of the Barrière de Roule having already been suspected, the idea of placing the articles where they were found might have been naturally entertained. And there is no real evidence, although La Soleil so supposes, that the articles discovered had been more than a very few days in the thicket, while there is much circumstantial proof that they could not have remained there without attracting attention during the 20 days elapsing between the fatal Sunday and the afternoon upon which they were found by the boys. They were all mildewed down hard, says Le Soleil, adopting the opinions of its predecessors, with the action of the rain and stuck together from mildew. The grass had grown around and over some of them. The silk of the parasol was strong, but the threads of it were run together within. The upper part, where it had been doubled and folded, was all mildewed and rotten, and tore on being opened. In respect to the grass having grown around and over some of them, it is obvious that the fact could only have been ascertained from the words, and thus from the recollections of two small boys. For these boys removed the articles and took them home before they had been seen by a third party. But the grass will grow, especially in warm and damp weather, such as was that of the period of the murder, as much as 2 or 3 inches in a single day. A parasol lying upon a newly turfed ground might, in a single week, be entirely concealed from sight by the upspringing grass. And touching that mildew upon which the editor of La Soleil is so pertinaciously insists that he employs the word no less than 3 times in the brief paragraph just quoted, is he really unaware of the nature of this mildew? Is he to be told that is one of the many classes of fungus, of which the most ordinary feature is its upspringing and decadence within 24 hours? And thus we see at a glance that what has been so most triumphantly adduced in the support of the idea that the articles had been for at least 3 or 4 weeks in the thicket is most absurdly null as regards any evidence of the fact. On the other hand, it is exceedingly difficult to believe that these articles could have remained in the thicket specified for a longer period than a single week, for a longer period than from one Sunday to the next. Those who know anything of the vicinity of Paris know the extreme difficulty of finding seclusion unless at a great distance from its suburbs. Such a thing as an unexplored or even an unfrequently visited recess amid its woods or groves is not for a moment to be imagined. Let anyone who, being at heart a lover of nature, is yet chained by duty to the dust and the heat of this great metropolis, let any such one attempt, even during the weekdays, to slake his thirst for solitude amid the scenes of natural loveliness which immediately surround us at every second step. We will find the growing charm dispelled by the voice and the personal intrusion of some ruffian or a party of carousing blackguards. He will seek privacy amid the densest foliage, all in vain. Here are the very nooks where the unwashed most abound, here are the temples most desecrate. With sickness of the heart, the wanderer will flee back to the polluted Paris as to a less odious, because less incongruous stink of pollution. But if the vicinity of the city is so beset during the working days of the week, how much more so on the Sabbath? It is now especially that, released from the claims of labor or deprived of the customary opportunities of crime, the town blackguard reeks and seeks the precincts of the town, not through love of the rural, which in his heart he despises, but by way of escape from the restraints and conventionalities of society. He desires less the fresh air and the green trees than the utter license of the country. Here at the roadside inn or beneath the foliage of the woods, he indulges unchecked by any eye, except those of his boon companions, in all the mad excess of a counterfeit hilarity, the joint offspring of liberty and of rum. I say nothing more than what must be most obvious to every dispassionate observer, when I repeat that the circumstances of the articles in question having remained undiscovered for a longer period than from one Sunday to another in any thicket in the immediate neighborhood of Paris is to be looked upon as little less than miraculous. But there are not wanting other grounds for the suspicion that the articles were placed in the thicket with the view of diverting attention from the real scene of the outrage. And first, let me direct your notice to the date of the discovery of the articles. Collate this with the date of the fifth extract made by myself from the newspapers. You will find that the discovery followed almost immediately the urgent communications sent to the evening paper. These communications, although various and apparently from various sources, tended all to the same point, viz., the direction of attention to a gang as the perpetrators of the outrage, and to the neighborhood of the Barrière de Roule as its scene. Now, here, of course, the situation is not that, in consequence of these communications or of the public attention by them directed, the articles were found by the boys. But the suspicion might and may well have been that the articles were not before found by the boys, for the reason that the articles had not before been in the thicket, having been deposited there only at so late a period as at the date, or shortly prior to the date of the communications, by the guilty authors of these communications themselves. This thicket was a singular, an exceedingly singular one. It was unduly dense. Within its naturally walled enclosure were three extraordinary stones, forming a seat with a back and a footstool. And this thicket, so full of art, was in the immediate vicinity, within a few rods of the dwelling of Madame de Luc, whose boys were in the habit of closely examining the shrubberies about them in search of the bark of the sassafras. Would it be a rash wager, a wager of 1,000 to 1, that a day never passed over the heads of these boys without finding at least one of them ensconced in the umbrageous hall and enthroned upon its natural throne? Those who would hesitate at such a wager have either never been boys themselves, or have forgotten the boyish nature. I repeat, it is exceedingly hard to comprehend how the articles could have remained in this thicket undiscovered for a longer period than 1 or 2 days, and that thus there is good ground for suspicion, in spite of the dogmatic ignorance of La Soleil, that they were, at a comparatively late date, deposited where found. But there are still other and stronger reasons for believing them so deposited than any which I have as yet urged. And now, let me beg your notice to the highly artificial arrangement of the articles. On the upper stone lay a white petticoat, on the second a silk scarf. Scattered around were a parasol, gloves, and a pocket handkerchief bearing the name Marie Roget. Here is just such an arrangement as would be naturally be made by a not over acute person wishing to dispose the articles naturally. but it is by no means a really natural arrangement. I should rather have looked to see the things all lying on the ground and trampled underfoot. In the narrow limits of that bower, it would have been scarcely possible that the petticoat and scarf should have retained a position upon the stones when subjected to the brushing to and fro of many struggling persons. There was evidence, it is said, of a struggle. The earth was trampled, the bushes were broken, but the petticoat and the scarf were found deposited as if upon shelves. The pieces of the frock torn out by the bushes were about 3 inches wide and 6 inches long. One part of them was the hem of the frock. It had been mended. They looked like strips torn off. Here, inadvertently, La Soleil has employed an exceedingly suspicious phrase. The pieces as described do indeed look like strips torn off, but purposely and by hand. It is one of the rarest of accidents that a piece is torn off from any garment such as now in question by the agency of a thorn. From the very nature of such fabrics, a thorn or a nail, becoming tangled in them, tears them rectangularly, divides them into two longitudinal rents at a right angle with each other, and meeting at an apex where the thorn enters. But it is scarcely possible to conceive the piece torn off. I never so knew it, nor did you. To tear a piece off from such a fabric, two distinct forces in different directions will be in almost every case required. If there be two edges to the fabric, if, for example, it be a pocket handkerchief and it is desired to tear it from a slip, then and then only will one force serve the purpose. But in the present case, the question is of a dress presenting but one edge. To tear a piece from the interior when no edge is present could only be effected by a miracle through the agency of thorns. No one thorn could accomplish it. But even where an edge is presented, two thorns would be necessary, operating, that one in two distinct directions and the other in one. And this in the supposition that the edge is unhemmed. If hemmed, the matter is nearly out of question. We see the numerous and great obstacles in the way of pieces being torn off through the simple agency of thorns. Yet we are required to believe not only that one piece, but that many have been so torn, and one part too was of the hem of the frock. Another piece was part of the skirt, not the hem. That is to say, was torn completely out through the agency of thorns from the unedged interior of the dress. These, I say, are things which one may well be pardoned for disbelieving. Yet, taken collectively, they form perhaps less of reasonable ground for suspicion than the one startling circumstances of the articles having been left in this thicket at all by any murderers who had enough precaution to think of removing the corpse. You will not have apprehended me rightly, however, if you suppose it is my design to deny this thicket as the scene of the outrage. There might have been a wrong here, or more possibly an accident at Madame de Lux's, but in fact this is a point of minor importance. We are not engaged in an attempt to discover the scene, but to produce the perpetrators of the murder. What I have adduced, notwithstanding the minuteness with which I have adduced it, has been with the view first to show the folly of the position and headlong assertions of La Soleil, secondly and chiefly to bring you, by the most natural route, to a further contemplation of the doubt whether this assassination has or has not been the work of a gang. We will resume this question by mere allusion to the revolting details of the surgeon examined at the inquest. It is only necessary to say that his published inferences in regard to the number of ruffians have been properly ridiculed as unjust and totally baseless by all the reputable anatomists of Paris. Not that the matter might not have been inferred, but there was no ground for the inference. Was there not much for another? Let us now reflect upon the traces of the struggle, and let me ask what these traces have been supposed to demonstrate. A gang. But do they not rather demonstrate the absence of a gang? What struggle could have taken place? What struggle so violent and so enduring as to have left its traces in all directions, between a weak and defenseless girl and the gang of ruffians imagined. The silent grasp of a few rough arms, and all would have been over. The victim must have been absolutely passive at their will. You will here bear in mind that the arguments urged against the thicket as the scene are applicable in chief part only against it as the scene of an outrage committed by more than a single individual. If we imagine but one violator, we can conceive, and thus only conceive, the struggle of so violent and so obstinate a nature as to have left the traces apparent. Raiders from the Notpads. Reading every time. Wow, 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 wow. Grrr. And again, I've already mentioned the suspicion. How are we all doing? Eh? Coming to raid, and I've got a burp in me. Be glad you didn't catch that one. Laughing my arse off. Hey, first time chat. Sav and exit. Sav and exit. It's an amazing love story. Not really, is it? Romeo and Juliet. Always a happy time around Dadzig. Well, look, we're reading Poe. It's not my fault. I mean, we could read something more cheery, like Charles Dickens. Anyway, should we get back to it? We're reading The Mystery of Marie Roget for those of us who've just joined us. And we're a few pages away from discovering who the murderer is. Dupin is the intellectual individual involved, and he's got quite a deductive mind. Want to launch a choo-choo? Choo-choo! Dupin. Good night. Oh, there we go. A little bit of chat there. And again, I've already mentioned the suspicion to be excited by the fact that the articles in question were suffered to remain at all in the thicket were discovered. It seems almost impossible that these evidences of guilt should have been accidentally left where found. There was sufficient presence of mind, it is supposed, to remove the corpse, and yet a more positive evidence than the corpse itself, whose features might have been quickly obliterated by decay, is allowed to lie conspicuously in the scene of the outrage. I allude to the handkerchief as the name of the deceased. If this was accident, it was not the accident of a gang. We can imagine it only the accident of an individual. Let us see. An individual has committed the murder. He is alone with the ghost of the departed. He is appalled by what lies motionless before him. The fury of his passion is over, and there is abundant room in his heart for the natural awe of the deed. His is none of that confidence which the presence of numbers inevitably inspires. He is alone with the dead. He trembles and is bewildered. Yet there is necessity for disposing of the corpse. He bears it to the river and leaves behind him the other evidence of his guilt. For it is difficult, if not impossible, to carry all the burden at once, and it will be easy to return for what is left. But in his toilsome journey to the water, his fears redouble with him. The sounds of life encompass his path. A dozen times he hears or fancies he hears the step of an observer. Even the very lights from the city bewilder him. Yet in time, by long and frequent pauses of deep agony, he reaches the river's bank and disposes of his ghastly charge, perhaps through the medium of a boat. But now, what treasure does the world hold? What threat of vengeance could it hold out which would have power to urge the return of that lonely murderer over that toilsome and perilous path to the thicket and its blood-chilling recollections? He returns not. Let the consequences be what they may. He could not return if he would. His soul thought his immediate escape. He turns his back forever upon these dreadful shrubberies and flees as from the rest to come. But how with a gang? Their number would have inspired them with confidence, if indeed confidence is ever wanting by the breast of the arrant blackguard, and of arrant blackguards alone are the supposed gangs ever constituted. Their number, I say, would have prevented the bewildering and unreasoning terror which I imagine to paralyze a single man. Could we suppose an oversight in one or two or three? This oversight could have been remedied by a fourth. They would have left nothing behind them, for their number would have enabled them to carry all at once. There would have been no need of return. And consider now the circumstances that in the outer garment of the corpse when found, a slip about a foot wide had been torn upward from the bottom hem to the waist, wound three times around the waist, and secured by a sort of hitch in the back. This was done with the obvious design of affording a handle by which to carry the body, but would any number of men have dreamed of resorting to such an expedient? To three or four, the limbs of the corpse would have afforded not only a sufficient but the most possible hold. The device is that of a single individual, and this brings us to the fact that between the thicket and the river the rails of the fences were found taken down, and the ground bore evident traces of some heavy burden having been dragged along it. But would a number of men have put themselves to the superfluous trouble of taking down a fence for the purpose of dragging through the corpse, which they might have lifted over any fence in an instant? Would a number of men have so dragged the corpse at all as to have left evident traces of the dragging? And here we must refer to the observation of La Commerciale, an observation upon which I have already in some measure commented. A piece, says his journal, of one of the unfortunate girl's petticoats was torn out and tied under her chin and around the back of her head, probably to prevent screams. This was done by fellows who had no pocket handkerchiefs. I have before suggested that a genuine blackguard is never without a pocket handkerchief. But it is not this fact that I now especially advert, that it was not through want of a handkerchief for the purpose imagined by La Commerciale that this bandage was employed. It is rendered apparent by the handkerchief left in the thicket, and that the object was not to prevent screams, appears also from the bandage having been employed in preference to would be so much better have answered the purpose. But the language of the evidence speaks of the strip in question as found around the neck, fitting loosely, and secured with a hard knot. These words are sufficiently vague, but differ materially from those of La Commerciale. The slip was 18 inches wide, and therefore, although of muslin, would form a strong band when folded or rumpled longitudinally, and thus rumpled it was discovered. My inference is this: the solitary murderer, having borne the corpse for some distance, whether from the thicket or elsewhere, by means of the bandage hitched around its middle, found the weight in this mode of procedure too much for his strength. He resolved to drag the burthen. The evidence goes to show that it was dragged. With this object in view, it became necessary to attach something like a rope to one of the extremities. It could be best attached about the neck, where the head would prevent it slipping off. And now the murderer bethought himself unquestionably of the bandage about the loins. He could have used this, but for its volution about the corpse, the hitch which embarrassed it, and the reflection that it had not been torn off from the garment. It was easier to tear a new slip from the petticoat. He tore it, made it fast about the neck, and so dragged his victim to the brink of the river, that this bandage, only attainable with trouble and delay, but imperfectly answering its purpose, that this bandage was employed at all, demonstrates that the necessity for its employment sprang from the circumstances arising at a period when the handkerchief was no longer attainable, that is to say, arising, as we have imagined, after quitting the thicket, if the thicket it was, and on the road between the thicket and the river. But the evidence, you will say, of Madame de Luc points especially to the presence of a gang in the vicinity of the thicket at or about the epoch of the murder. This I grant. I doubt if there were not a dozen gangs, as such described by Madame de Luc, in about the vicinity of Barrier de Roule at or about the period of this tragedy. But the gang which has drawn upon itself the appointed animadversion, although the somewhat tardy and very suspicious evidence of Madame de Luc, is the only gang which is represented by that honest and scrupulous old lady as having eaten her cakes and swallowed her brandy without putting themselves to the trouble of making her payment. Antique ilia irae. But what is the precise evidence of Madame de Luc? A gang of miscreants made their appearance, behaved boisterously, ate and drank without making payment, followed in the route of the young man and the girl, returned to the inn about dusk, and recrossed the river as if in great haste. Now, this great haste very possibly seemed greater in the eyes of Madame de Luc, since she dwelt lingeringly and lamentingly upon her violated cakes and ale for which she might still have entertained a faint hope of compensation. Why otherwise, since it was about dusk, should she make a point about the haste? It is of no cause for wonder, surely, that even a gang of blackguards should make haste to get home when a wide river is to be crossed in small boats, when storm impends, and when night approaches. I say approaches, for the night had not yet arrived. It was only about dusk that the incident of haste of these miscreants offended the sober eyes of Madame de Luc. But we are told that it was upon this very evening that Madame de Luc, as well as her eldest son, heard the screams of a female in the vicinity of the inn. And in what words was Madame de Luc designated the period of the evening at which these screams were heard? It was soon after dark, she says, but soon after dark is at least dark, and about dusk is as certainly daylight. Thus it is abundantly clear that the gang quitted the Barrier de Roule prior to the screams overheard by Madame de Luc. And although in many reports of the evidence, the relative expressions in question are distinctly and invariably employed, just as I have employed them in this conversation with yourself, no notice whatever of the gross discrepancy has as yet been taken by any of the public journals or by any of the myrmidons of police. I shall add but one to the arguments against the gang, but this one has, to my own understanding at least, a weight altogether irresistible. Under the circumstances of large reward offered, and full pardon to any king's evidence, it is not to be imagined for a moment that some member of a gang of low ruffians or of any body of men would not long ago have betrayed his accomplices. Each one of a gang so placed is not so much greedy of reward or anxious for escape as fearful of betrayal. He betrays eagerly and early that he may not himself be betrayed. That the secret has not been divulged is the very best proof of that it is, in fact, a secret. The horrors of this dark deed are known only to one or two living human beings and to God. Let us sum up now the meager yet certain fruits of our long analysis. We have attained the idea either of a fatal accident under the roof of Madame de Luc, or of a murder perpetrated in the thicket at the Barrier de Roule by a lover, or at least by an intimate and secret associate of the deceased. This associate is of swarthy complexion. This complexion, the hitch in the bandage, and the sailor's knot with which the bonnet ribbon is tied point to a seaman. His companionship with the deceased, a gay but not an abject young girl, designates him as above the grade of the common sailor. Here, the well-written and urgent communications to the journals are much in the way of corroboration. The circumstances of the first elopement, as mentioned by Le Mercury, tends to blend the idea of the seaman with that of the naval officer, who is first known to have led the unfortunate into crime. And here most fitly comes the consideration of the continued absence of him of the dark complexion. Let me pause to observe that the complexion of this man is dark and swarthy. It was no common swarthiness which constitutes the sole point of remembrance, both as regards Valence and Madame de Luc. But why is this man absent? Was he murdered by the gang? If so, why are there only traces of the assassinated girl? The scene of the two outrages were naturally presupposed identical. And where is his corpse? The assassins would most probably have disposed of both in the same way, but it may be said that this man lives and is deterred from making himself known through dread of being charged with the murder. This consideration might be supposed to operate upon him now at this late period, since it has been given in evidence that he was seen with Marie, but there would have been no force at the period of the deed. The first impulse of an innocent man would have been to announce the outrage and to aid in identifying the ruffians. This policy would have suggested he had been seen with the girl. He had crossed the river with her in an open ferry boat. The denouncing of the assassins would have appeared, even to an idiot, the surest and sole means of relieving himself from suspicion. We cannot suppose him, on the night of the fatal Sunday, both innocent himself and incognizant of an outrage committed, yet only under such circumstances is it possible to imagine that he would have failed, if alive, in the denouncement of the assassins. And what means are ours of attaining the truth? We shall find these means multiplying and gathering distinctness as we proceed. Let us sift to the bottom of this affair for the first elopement. Let us know the full history of the officer with his present circumstances and his whereabouts at the precise period of the murder. Let us carefully compare with each other the various communications sent to the evening paper, in which the object was to inculpate a gang. This done, let us compare these communications, both as regards style and MS, with those sent to the morning paper at the previous period and insisting so vehemently upon the guilt of Menet. And all this done, let us again compare these various communications with the known MSS of the officer. Let us endeavour to ascertain by repeated questionings of Madame de Luc and her boys, as well as of the omnibus driver Valence, some or more of the personal appearance and bearing of the man of dark complexion. Queries, skilfully directed, will not fail to elicit from some of these parties information on this particular point or upon others, information which the parties themselves may not even be aware of possessing. But let us now trace the boat picked up by the bargeman on the morning of Monday, the 23rd of June, on which was removed from the barge office without the cognizance of the officer in attendance and without the rudder, at some period prior to the discovery of the corpse. With the proper caution and perseverance, we shall infallibly trace this boat, for not only can the bargeman who picked it up identify it, but the rudder is at hand. The rudder of a sailboat would not have been abandoned without inquiry by one altogether at ease in heart. And here let me pause to insinuate a question. There was no advertisement of the picking up of this boat. It was silently taken to the barge office and as silently removed. But its owner or employer, how happened he, at so early a period as Tuesday morning, to be informed without the agency of advertisement of the locality of the boat taken up on Monday, unless we imagine some connection with the Navy, some personal permanent connection leading to cognizance of its minute interest, its petty local news. In speaking of the lonely assassin dragging his burden to the shore, I have already suggested the probability of his availing himself of a boat. Now, we are to understand that Marie Roget was precipitated from a boat. This would naturally have been the case. The corpse could not have been trusted to the shallow waters of the shore. The peculiar marks on the back of the shoulders of the victim tell of the bottom ribs of a boat. That the body was found without weight is also corroborative of the idea. If thrown from the shore, a waiter would have been attached. We can only account for its absence by supposing the murderer to have neglected the precaution of supplying himself with it before pushing off. In the act of consigning the corpse to the waters, he would unquestionably have noticed his oversight, but then no remedy would have been at hand. Any risk would have been preferred to a return to the accursed shore. Having rid himself of his ghastly charge, the murderer would have hastened to the city. There, at some obscure wharf, he would have left on land, but the boat, would he have secured it? He would have been in no great too haste. He would have been in too great a haste for such things as securing a boat. Moreover, in fastening it to the wharf, he would have felt it as if securing evidence against himself. His natural thought would have been to cast from him, as far as possible, all that had been held connection with his crime. He would not only have fled from the wharf, but he would not have permitted the boat to remain. Assuredly, he would have cast it adrift. Let us pursue our fancies in the morning. The wretch is stricken with the unutterable horror at finding that the boat has been picked up and detained at a locality which he is in daily habit of frequenting, at a locality, perhaps, which his duty compels him to frequent. The next night, without daring to ask for the rudder, he removes it. Now, where is that rudderless boat? Let it be one of our first purposes to discover. With the first glimpse we obtain of it, the dawn of our success shall begin. This boat shall guide us with a rapidity which will surprise even ourselves to him who employed it in the midnight of the fatal Sabbath. Corroborations will rise upon corroboration, and the murderer will be traced. For reasons which we shall not specify, but which to many readers will appear obvious, we have taken the liberty of here omitting from the MSS placed in our hands such portion as details the following up of the apparently slight clue obtained by Dupin. We feel it advisable only to state in brief that the result desired was brought to pass, and the prefect fulfilled punctually, although with reluctance, the terms of his compact with the Chevalier. Mr. Poe's article concludes with the following words: "It will be understood that I speak of coincidences and no more. It will be understood that I speak of coincidences and no more. What I have said about this topic must suffice. In my own heart there dwells no faith in prenature." I'm not sure now if this is Dupin or Poe. It is the mystery of Marie Roger. Yeah. I think this is Poe. Is Dupin? Dupin? Right. It will be understood that I speak of coincidences and no more. What I have said upon this topic must suffice. In my own heart there dwells no faith in praeternature. That nature and its God are two, no man who thinks will deny. That the latter, creating the former, can at will control or modify it is also unquestionable. I say at will, for the question is of will, and not, as the insanity of logic has assumed, of power. It is not that the deity cannot modify his laws, but that we insult him in imagining a possible necessity for modification. In their origin, these laws were fashioned to embrace all contingencies which could lie in the future. With God, all is now. I repeat, then, that I speak of these things only as of coincidences. And further, in what I relate, it will be seen that between the fates of the unhappy Mary Celicia Rogers, so far as that fate is known, and the fate of one Marie Roget up to a certain epoch in her history, there has existed a parallel in the contemplation of whose wonderful exactitude the reason becomes embarrassed. I say all this will be seen, but let it not for a moment be supposed that, in proceeding with the sad narrative of Marie from the epoch just mentioned, and in tracing to its denouement the mystery which enshrouded her, it is my covert design to hint at an extension of the parallel, or even to suggest that the measures adopted in Paris for the discovery of the assassin of a grisette, or measures founded in any similar ratiocination, would produce any similar result. For, in respect to the latter branch of the supposition, it should be considered that the most trifling variations in the facts of the two cases might give rise to the most important miscalculations. By diverting thoroughly the two courses of events, very much as in arithmetic, an error which, in its own individuality, may be inappreciable, produces, at length, by dint of multiplication at all points of the process, a result enormously at variance with the truth. And in regard to the former branch, we must not fail to hold in view that the very calculus of probabilities to which I have referred forbids all ideas of extension of the parallel, forbids it with a positiveness strong and decided just in proportion as this parallel has already been long drawn and exact. This is one of the most anomalous propositions, which, seemingly appealing to thought altogether apart from the mathematical, is yet one which only the mathematician can fully entertain. Nothing, for example, is more difficult than to convince the merely general reader that the fact of sixes having been thrown twice in succession by a player at dice is sufficient cause for betting the largest odds that sixes will not be thrown in the third attempt. A suggestion to this effect is usually rejected by the intellect at once. It does not appear that the two throws which have been completed and which lie now absolutely in the past can have influence upon the throw which exists only in the future. The chance of throwing sixes seems to be precisely as it was at any ordinary time, that is to say, subject only to the influence of the various other throws which may be made by the dice. And this is a reflection which appears so exceedingly obvious that attempts to controvert it are received more frequently with a derisive smile than with anything like respectful attention. The error here involved, a gross error redolent of mischief, I cannot pretend to expose within the limits assigned me at present, and with the philosophical it needs no exposure. It may be sufficient here to say that it forms one of an infinite series of mistakes which arise in the path of reason through her propensity for seeking truth in detail. All right, where did you lose me? You didn't. All right. So we don't find out who did it then. It's a bit annoying. I don't think there were any bosoms in that story. Were there? Thank you, Jared. Dude. There were? There's a lot of monologuing for a somewhat uncertain ending. You're quite right. There were bosoms. I missed them. I completely brushed over the bosom. I know. Let me see if I can find them. Blah, 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 blah. Elopement. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, blah. Didn't tell us who the murderer was. Blah, blah. How annoying. Blah, blah. Blah, blah. Scene. Rule. Barrier. Mildew. Mildew. Parasol. Mildew. Blackguards. Sabbath. Sabbath was mentioned a few times. Blackguards. Blackguard Sabbath. I don't see no bosoms here. Corpse, handkerchief, gang. We mentioned gangs a lot. Gang, perilous, blackguards, handle, evidence, dragging, neck, corpse, bandage, middle, weight. I don't see any bosoms here. You're having me on with the bosoms. I mean, if you heard them, count them up. Ruffian, girl, ferry boat, MS, MSS. I don't see no bosoms here. I trust chat in this one. Six bosoms? Hang on, the start of tonight or the start of the whole? The start. Oh, Sally, we need a proper bosom counter. We can't be doing half measures. You mean the start of tonight? Start of tonight? Give over. I have to read the whole bloody thing again. I'm not letting this go now, gang. Chat amongst yourselves. You know it's important that we have a proper bosom counter in effect. I'm back at the mildew bit, guys. Mildew. There's no bosoms in the mildew. No mildew in the bosoms. I mean, it's possible that I was, so invested in reading the role that I missed the bosoms. That was a bit weird, wasn't it? No, we're on 25 until we find bosoms in tonight's reading. I'm not having it. Sorry, but I mean, why were they not flagged up at the time? Do you know what I mean? Or were they? Yeah, I do, because I don't remember reading them. Please, Valeria, please point it out. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I skipped over bosoms. I'd be most disappointed. I mean, I've got 3 inches wide and 6 inches long. Found that in the text. Prickly. It says there that a strip got ripped off and it was 3 inches wide and 6 inches long. Two edges of the fabric. Yeah, someone find out. It was just lurking. Everyone except me. Yeah, but Where are you getting this from, Valeria? I don't understand what this has to do. I don't know how Virginia comes into this. Thank you, Mekishimo. I feel like I'm being trolled here tonight. I'm being trolled. I have internet. Yeah? I got internet too, you know. Watch me do my internet over here. I'm gonna internet with you. The Mystery of Marie Roger. End the stream so we can check the check. 1842. He done all right, didn't he, my boy? He done all right. Um, I don't know how to search in it though. I'm not that good. Text selection tool. That'll be all right. Oh. Someone help me out. The bosom count. Control F. Thanks. Bosom. 1. Bosom and her affianced suitor. Ah, yes, thank you. There is one. There is one. And that would be when he was talking about her coming to visit. All right, we found it now. The surprise and suspicion aroused in the bosom. $3 in the afternoon. Yeah, all right. So okay. Okay, so we're gonna add 1, Valeria. We're up to 26. Sally, that's the official count. Honestly, guys, give me a heart attack at this rate. Yeah, that's the least of the worries. 1 bosom is enough for all of us. I was told that only the seasoned seaweeds are glutinous. Oh, well, I guess because of the seasoning. Thank you, Jade. 26 bosoms. Only bosom I need is Ishtvan's. All right, chill your heels. You get on his string now. Well, seaweed should be gluten free. Seaweed, by its virtue, is gluten free. If it's been treated with some kind of coating, then that's something else, isn't it? All right. We're going to read Mother. Mother! Yeah, right, prickly triangle. Nothing's. Oh. Oh. Yes, we have a correct count now. Your poems to mother. Yeah, but it's really sweet. Okay, here we go. Ready? To my mother, because I feel that in the heavens above, the angels whispering to one another can find among their burning terms of love none so devotional as that of mother. Therefore, by that dear name I long have called you, you who are more than mother unto me, and fill my heart of hearts where death installed you, in setting my Virginia's spirit free. My mother, my own mother who died early, was but the mother of myself, but you are mother to the one I loved so dearly, and thus are dearer than the mother I knew, by that infinity with which my wife was dearer to my soul than its soul life. Sad. Um, let's see if we can slip one in before 10 o'clock. Just a short one. Not that, that's 30 pages. Not that, that's 10 pages. 6 pages. Von Campelen and his discoverer. Um, excuse me. Beer. What about the island of Fae? I'm a grub. Yeah. A grubby little grub, a grubby little grub with a hole in his elbow, a grubby little grub, a grubbity grub, grubbity grub, 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 grub. Posture, Dadzig. Oh, did you hear that? Oh. Fayers and fairies. No, Fay. Fay. As in Fay? I don't know. It's 5 pages long. We're gonna go for it, unless we've already read it. I need to start marking these more diligently. 285. We should hope so, Valeria. The bosom counter has been woefully low. Poe has let us down the last couple of times. Okay, are we ready? The island of the island of the Fae. I think it is uh, Fae with an E, but spelled here with Fay. The island of the Fae, nullus enim locus sine genio est. Servius. La musique, says Marmontel in those Contes Marot, which in all our translations we have insisted upon calling the moral tales, as if in mockery of their spirit. La musique est le seul des talents qui jouissent de lui-même, que le autre veulent des témoins. He here confounds the pleasure derivable from sweet sounds with the capacity for creating them. No more than any other talent is that for music susceptible of complete enjoyment, where there is no second party to appreciate its exercise. And it is only common with other talents that it produces effects which may be fully enjoyed in solitude. The idea which the raconteur has either failed to entertain clearly or has sacrificed in his expression for his national love of point is doubtless the very tenable one that the higher order of music is the most thoroughly estimated when we are exclusively alone. The proposition in this form will be admitted at once by those who love the lyre for its own sake and for its spiritual uses, but there is one pleasure still within the reach of fallen mortality, and perhaps only one which owes even more than does music to the accessory sentiment of seclusion. I mean, the happiness experienced in the contemplation of natural scenery. In truth, the man who would behold aright the glory of God upon earth, most in solitude, behold that glory. To me at least, the presence, not of human life only, but of life in any other form than that of the green things which grow upon the soil and are voiceless, is a stain upon the landscape, is at war with the genius of the scene. I love indeed to regard the dark valleys and the grey rocks and the waters that silently smile and the forests that sigh in uneasy slumbers and the proud watchful mountains that look down upon all. I love to regard these as themselves but the colossal members of one vast animate and sentient whole, a whole whose form, that of the sphere, is the most perfect and most inclusive of all, whose path is, among associate planets, whose meek handmaiden is the moon, whose immediate sovereign is the sun, whose life is eternity, whose thought is that of a god, whose enjoyment is knowledge, whose destinies are lost in immensity, whose cognizance of ourselves is akin with our own cognizance of the animalculae which infest the brain, of which being, in consequence, regard as purely inanimate and material, much in the same manner as these animalculae must regard us. Our telescopes and our mathematical investigations assure us on every hand, notwithstanding the cant of the more ignorant of the priesthood, that space, and therefore that bulk, is an important consideration in the eyes of the Almighty. The cycles in which the stars move are at best most adapted for the evolution without collision of the greatest possible number of bodies. The forms of those bodies are accurately such as, within a given surface, to include greatest possible amount of matter, while the surface themselves are so disposed as to accommodate a denser population than could be accommodated on the same surfaces otherwise arranged. Nor is it any argument against bulk being an object with God, that space itself is infinite, for there may be an infinity of matter to fill it. And since we see clearly that the endowment of matter with vitality is a principle, indeed, as far as our judgment extends, the leading principle in the operations of deity, it is scarcely logical to imagine it confined to the regions of the minute, where we daily trace it, and not extending to those of august. As we find cycle within cycle without end, and yet all revolving around one far distant centre which is the God's head, may we not analogically suppose in the same manner life within life, the less within the greater, and all within the Spirit divine? In short, we are madly erring through self-esteem in believing man, in either his temporal or future destinies, to be more moment in the universe than that vast clod of valley which he tills and contemns, and to which he denies a soul for no more profound reason than that he does not behold it in operation. These fancies, and such as they, have always given to me meditations among the mountains and the forests, by the rivers and the ocean, a tinge of what the everyday world would not fail to term fantastic. My wandering amid such scenes have been many and far-reaching, and often solitary, and the interest with which I have strayed through many a dim, deep valley, or gazed into the reflected heaven of many bright lake, has been an interest greatly deepened by the thought that I have strayed and gazed alone. What flippant Frenchman was it who said, in allusion to the well-known work of Zimmermann, that la solitude est une belle chose, mais il faut quelque pour vous dire que la solitude est une belle chose? The epigram cannot be gainsaid, but the necessity is a thing that does not exist. It was during one of my lonely journeyings amid a far distant region of mountain locked within mountain, and sad rivers and melancholy tarns writhing or sleeping within all, that I chanced upon a certain rivulet and island. I came upon them suddenly in the leafy June, and threw myself upon the turf beneath the branches of an unknown odorous shrub, that I might doze as I contemplated the scene. I felt that thus only should I look upon it, such was the character phantasm which it wore. On all sides, save to the west, where the sun was about sinking, arose the verdant walls of the forest. The little river, which turned sharply in its course and was thus immediately lost to sight, seemed to have no exit from its prison, but to be absorbed by the deep green foliage of the trees to the east, while in the opposite quarter, so it appeared to me as I lay at length and glanced upward, there poured down noiselessly and continuously into the valley a rich golden and crimson waterfall from the sunset fountains of the sky. About midway in the short vista which my dreamy vision took in, one small circular island, profusely verdured, reposed upon the bosom of the stream. So blended bank and shadow there that each seemed pendulous in air. So mirror-like was the glassy water that it was scarcely possible to say at what point upon the slope of the emerald turf its crystal dominion began. My position enabled me to include in a single view both the eastern and western extremities of the islet, and I observed a singularly marked difference in their aspects. The latter was all one radiant harem of garden beauties. It glowed and blushed beneath the eye of the slant sunlight, and fairly laughed with flowers. The grass was short, springy, sweet-scented, and asphodel interspersed. The trees were lithe, mirthful, erect, bright, slender, and graceful, of eastern figure and foliage, with bark smooth, glossy, and party-coloured. There seemed a deep sense of life and joy about all, and although no airs blew from out the heavens, yet everything had motion through the gentle sweepings to and fro of innumerable butterflies that might have been mistaken for tulips with wings. The other or eastern end of the isle was whelmed in the blackest shade. A sombre yet beautiful and peaceful gloom here pervaded all things. The trees were dark in colour and mournful in form and attitude, wreathing themselves into sad, solemn, and spectral shapes that conveyed the ideas of mortal sorrow and untimely death. The grass wore the deep tint of the cypress, and the heads of its blades hung droopingly, and hither and thither among it were many small unsightly, while other shadows issued. Did you lose me? Where did you lose me? What was the last thing that you heard? Yes, but where did you lose me? Small something. Did we have innumerable butterflies that might have been mistaken for tulips with wings? I believe so. Aha. The grass was quite absolute keynote. The other or eastern end of the isle was whelmed in the blackest shade. A sombre yet beautiful and peaceful gloom here pervaded all things. The trees were dark in colour and mournful in form and attitude, wreathing themselves into sad, solemn, and spectral shapes that conveyed ideas of mortal sorrow and untimely death. The grass wore the deep tint of the cypress, and the heads of its blades hung droopingly, and Hither and thither among it were many small unsightly hillocks, low and narrow and not very long, that had the aspect of graves, but were not, although over and all about them the rue and the rosemary clambered. The shade of the trees fell heavy. Well, this is pissing me off. I'm trying not to be annoyed. The Fae don't want me to finish this story. Come on now. Let us finish this story. It's so beautiful. Where did you lose me this time? I'm really enjoying reading this story as well. So this is really quite frustrating. Like nothing has changed. You might be right, actually. Quite Valeria. Aspect of graves. I think maybe. All right, I'm going to take the hint. I'm going to take the hint. Something is saying something. We're going to leave it there because maybe the Fae need to be honored or something before we finish this story. So we're going to leave it there. I don't think it's cursed. I think it's protected. I think my I find it interesting that since this internet issue started, more people have been coming back into view. All right, tell me, is anyone? Can we raid anyone? Is that possible? Because I'm done with this. Let's Zoom call, yeah. All right, let's go. Let's go raid. I keep forgetting how to do this. Uh, so we're just gonna call it a night because evidently the internet is just decided to or Twitter. Yeah, please tune in tomorrow for the soup, and hopefully it'll bloody let us do it. Because otherwise that would suck big time. Where are you, angelic cabbage? What's no? Shh.